Did you ever hear the tragedy of Jay the Forgotten? I thought not. It is not a story Glitch would tell you. It's a community meme at this point. Jay was part of the main disassembly drone trio, serving as the series' first main antagonist, while making quite the impression on the fandom. She died in the pilot, but was brought back into the show to everybody's intrigue, only to do next to nothing for the rest of the runtime. The way Jay's character progression is handled in the show is what some consider to be unnatural. Hello everybody, I am the Dire Duck. With the Murdrone finale now being out for a while, it gives us the chance to reflect back on the show and give some attention to its lesser discussed characters. So today, we'll be talking about our favourite corporate ladder climber and pen enthusiast, the one and only Jay. Oh Jay, poor Jay, our third member of the Forgotten Four. What happened to you? Things looked so promising for you at first. In the pilot you made quite the impression on fans, but as the show went on, things just kept getting worse and worse for you. You got killed off in the pilot, only to get brought back again, only then to die again, only to get brought back once more, only for you to do little of consequence throughout the rest of the show. But the question is, why is this the case? And could Glitch have avoided this with different writing decisions? That is the question I aim to answer today. We will have a look back into who Jay was as a character, what role she served in the show's plot, how and why she was so poorly handled, and finally, we will speculate on what Liam and Glitch could have done differently to improve Jay. But before we begin, remember to bite through that like button and purchase that subscribe button, as each one helped Jay climb the corporate ladder. So let's begin with episode 1. Things start off quite well for Jay here, with her having quite a lot of screen time. We first see Jay in N's little flashback, with her stepping on and berating him, making certain members of the community quite jealous, I'm sure. We next see her in the present day, resetting N's memory before berating him once more. Jay then follows N's trail of carnage into the bunker alongside V, before actually giving him some praise for once. Jay then decides to show N the most important thing in the entire show, the branded pen. Though N doesn't vibe with the pens very much, so Jay feels it necessary to give him a virus before leaving him to die. Later on, Jay ends up fighting Uzi, does one last bit of berating, and then gets her head blown clean off. All in all, a pretty good showing for Jay, very much leaving a strong impression on the community, with her quickly becoming a lot of people's favourite character, despite her limited screen time. Well, this is when Jay peaks, in episode 1. Moving along, we have episode 2, where in a flashback we see Jay giving N a good kick in the head, and then scolding him for his failures as a butler, before she rapidly changes her tone after spotting Tessa. Though she can't fully hide her annoyance at seeing Tessa bring back a new worker drone. It's no one important, just some drone named Sin. I'm sure they won't be instrumental to the plot in any way going forward. Furthermore, this is also the episode where Jay comes back as a giant snake monster from the depths of your nightmares. But it is really the solver rather than Jay, so we will move along. Next, she shows up at the end of episode 3, alive once more with Tessa, who is totally human by the way. Jay's next appearance is her other particularly notable one, episode 5. This is where we actually get to see a bit more of Jay's personality. We learn here that Jay is very close to Tessa, being probably the only person she actually cares about, besides the company of course. She frees Tessa from her chains after some interesting motivation. She protects Tessa from V and then attempts to face down Sin, though we all know how that turns out. Back in the present, we see her out of the frozen lake with the totally real Tessa, and of course Doll, which then leads into episode 6. So, what does Jay do in episode 6? Well, she shoots at Doll a bit, explains how she came back due to cloning, and then gets sent to guard the ship by Tessa for the rest of the episode, effectively removing her from the episode's plot. Moving on to episode 7, she is seen flying around, destroying every other spaceship on Copper 9 in order to prevent anyone else from trying to leave the planet, before she then gets run over by the magic school bus, with then Jay being set up to fight Lizzie, Fad and Khan in the finale. However, if you have seen my videos on Fad and Khan, you will know that doesn't end up happening. Instead, Jay somehow gets her ship stolen by N, before then having it returned to her by Sin. in, let's say, a different condition to how she last saw it. Jay is then ordered to send the rest of our B team down to the planet's core, though she is soon interrupted by V. They then fight, both sides exchange insults, with Jay then revealing that she isn't all too happy about working for Sin, but she ultimately wants to be on the winning team, though unfortunately for her, she chose incorrectly, which results in her getting a nice new haircut, having like 3 fake out deaths over the course of the fight, before finally being knocked into a giant hole. The last time we see Jay in the show is her repairing the ship in the credits. So, that's all they wrote for Jay. Apart from her standout moments in the pilot and to a lesser extent episode 5, there really isn't a whole lot going on with her. She spends most of the series either berating N, standing around, or losing. A lot. Now, why is this? Why does the show seemingly hate Jay? Well, I suspect that Jay, just like many other characters in the show, such as Fad and Doll, was a victim of the show's many rewrites. As when you consider how little she ended up doing post episode 1, there never really ended up being much of a point in reviving her. This would explain why, in every episode, they lay the groundwork for Jay doing something important in the next episode, only to have her do nothing of value, as the show then changes its mind. We must not forget that there were month-long gaps in between each episode's release, so Liam and Glitch had a lot of time to change their mind between each episode. However, there is something else that could explain this. A not often discussed thing about Murder Drones' development is the fact that the story was influenced by the fandom's actions over its run. The most obvious example of this relates to the shipping wars that occurred around the time of episode 3, causing the show to very clumsily try to remedy the drama with this line in episode 4.
She's a kid, like us, V!
Now, considering the fact that Jay was a very popular character, especially in the early days of MD, punching well above her weight in the fandom, therefore, I suspect that the fanbase's love for Jay caused Glitch to bring them back from the dead and had her appear in future episodes as a form of fan service. However, the only issue is, well, they didn't really know what to actually do with her, with Jay basically ending up becoming the character equivalent of jangling a set of keys in front of somebody. As when you really break down her role in most episodes, Jay mostly acts as a mere plot device. Almost everything she does in the show is either in service to the development of another character, or as a way to drive the plot forward. This is only not the case in episode 1, where Jay takes the role as the main villain and the main representative of what the murder drones are. In both of these roles, she does quite well, showing herself to be a threatening character that is able to effectively promote what the murder drones were in the pilot. Cruel, murderous robots serving their corporate masters. Speaking of which, Jay also functions well as a mini corporate arm of the nebulous JC Jensen, basically being our main look into the company. However, as you might have already been thinking, the murder drones were not sent by JC Jensen to serve the company, but by the Absolute Solver, in the name of her machinations, which raises a lot of questions about what her actual deal is. We know that V was also aware of what their true purpose was on Copper 9, based off the pair's conversations in episode 8. There isn't much of a point in doing the whole corporate spiel in order to trick N, and pre-pilot N seemed to be happy to go along with whatever. After all,
I love doing anything!
Furthermore, she hardly needs to trick the other worker drones with this corporate act, so why does she continue to pretend like this is all for the company? Well, it is in episode 5 where we finally get to learn a bit more about Jay. Mainly 2 things: her close connection to Tessa, being shown as one of the only things she genuinely seems to care about, and that she still uses her corporate buzzwords even back before the events of the main show, suggesting that this is a core personality quirk of hers. However, maybe this is also Jane's coping mechanism, considering everything that has happened to her, choosing to instead pretend things are different and LARP as a JC Jensen employee as a way to cope with her trauma, rather than face the reality of being a slave for an eldritch AI. This would make sense, as all 3 of the disassembly drones have their own ways of coping with the trauma, with N choosing not to think about it, and V choosing to put up an emotional wall. Though, if this is true, it was never fully developed with Jay, unless you count some of Jay's words of regret in episode 8, but Jay's character needs a bit more than a few cryptic words in the finale. So, what could they have done differently with Jay's character? Well, we could just leave her dead after episode 1, but I can already hear the cries of the other Jay fans, so let's be a bit more imaginative about this. The most obvious change we could make would be to do the thing that everyone pre-episode 8 thought was going to happen, and have Jay be unaware of the testing twist. We can keep most things about the show the same, only the difference is all Jane's actions in the present day were done under the belief that it was actually Tessa, building off of one of Jane's character traits that we do see in episode 5 being her unconditional loyalty to Tessa. We could have a great character moment in the finale with Jay scolding V and N for betraying Tessa after all she had done for them. only then to be told that Tessa is actually Sin. Now, of course, she initially wouldn't believe them, but would eventually witness the rotten form of Tessin and would be confronted with the truth. Now, considering the fact that Jay was shown not to like Sin, it would be likely that Jay would then try to turn on Sin and join the rest of the cast in trying to defeat them, to avenge the memory of Tessa in a final swan song, either dying to Sin or being forcibly possessed, as you must remember, Sin is still Jay's admin. This will bring Jay's relationship with Tessa full circle and allow for a satisfying payoff to their character dynamic. If you really don't want to alter the show very much at all, you could simply have it so that, due to the Solver's hold on Jay, she perceives Tessin as the real Tessa, which would explain why she fights for her. This could be demonstrated in a very short scene in which we briefly see how Jay perceives the world, with Jay seeing Sin and Tessa. This very simple change doesn't alter the events of any of the episodes, but gives Jay's character a lot more depth and makes her actions more understandable and even give a tragic dimension to them. If we want to make much larger changes to the plot, we could instead have Jay and Tessa become a lot more active in the show's plot a lot earlier. Maybe we could have Jay make contact with V in episode 3 and have her be the catalyst for why V goes on her murder plan at the prom. Jay and Tessa could use V as a diversion while they break into the colony to steal Nori's notes on the cabin fever labs, with our cast only finding out about this at the end of the episode. This moves Jay back into the antagonistic forefront and gives her a prime opportunity to be the ruthless bastard we all know and love. It would also have the side benefit of providing V with a proper reason to join Team Worker Drones, and give Uzi another motive for going to Camp 98.7 to kick off the event of episode 4. We could see Jay appear again in episode 4, trying to take away the key bug, however being quickly warded off by Solver Uzi's rampage, causing her to then retreat and report the situation back to Tessa. This scene could also serve as a catalyst for why Jay and Tessa choose to make that deal with Dol. As in the actual show, the circumstances of how and why that deal took place were unclear. You could even have it so that Jay is the one to find Dol, giving the show a chance to have the two of them interact. The scenes with the other campers and the therapy session up in the sky could easily be trimmed down to make room for these changes if needed. Both these ideas keep Jay as a minor but active presence in the show's plot, with her constantly participating in the show's events in some way, giving her more to do and making her more of a credible antagonistic force. While these ideas are certainly not perfect, I think you'll agree it's better than Jay simply standing around and doing nothing for most of the show's run. Ultimately, Jay feels like a muddy character after episode 1, with the show never really finding a good use for her after they brought her back. We get teased with nearly every appearance of Jay that she might finally do something important in the next episode, but the show never fully commits. They build up Jay in small ways during the latter half of the show, demonstrating to the audience that there is more to her character than just being a minor villain, only to have the big reveal in the finale be the fact that she is just a minor villain. However, when you break down Jay's character in the finale, she is shown to be in a position where, despite disliking Sin and not really being a fan of working with her, at the end of the day, Sin is in full control over her due to her admin permissions. Even if Jay defied Sin, she would simply be killed and replaced with one of her many backups, never being able to fully escape Sin's influence, as she says so herself.
You know there's no escape, even in death!
So instead, Jay chose to do as she was ordered to and be on what she assumed to be the winning team. After all, from her perspective, she has seen Sin crush all opposition in her wake, so what hope would a bunch of random worker drones from a backwater mining world have of defeating her? It's not like Jay could have even resisted even if she wanted to anyway. She doesn't have that same freedom of choice that V and N had. When working off of this basis, I think Jay's character was supposed to be the living proof that N and V's relationship to Uzi is what saved them. In the same way Dol serves as a look into what Uzi would have become if she never met N, Jay serves as a look into what would have become of N and V if they never met Uzi, as it was the trio being brought together that was ultimately what caused them to be able to overcome all obstacles and avoid the miserable fates of both Jay and Dol. This will be building on the themes that the show heavily pushed in its latter half. So maybe this is what the purpose of Jay's character was in the end, a cautionary tale as to what happens when you stick to being a lone wolf that is always out for themselves, that doesn't let anyone else in. So, I must ask all of you watching, was this ultimately a good use of Jay's character in the end? Were one of my suggestions for what they should have done with her character better in your opinion? Should Jay have simply stayed dead after the pilot? Or do you have your own idea for what they should have done with her character? Let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, that'll be all from me. Remember to like and subscribe and do all the other things that every other YouTuber tells you to do. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, check out my other videos, some of which are even good. Maybe. Either way, I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye!